Sarah Martinez stepped onto the military shooting range with her chin held high, even as whispers followed her every move. At 22, she was the youngest recruit in the advanced marksmanship program, and the only woman among 37 men. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete range, and the smell of gun oil mixed with the desert air. "Look what we got here," muttered Sergeant Davis, a barrel-chested man with arms like tree trunks. "Little girl thinks she can play soldier." His comment sparked a ripple of laughter from the other recruits gathered around the equipment table. Sarah had heard it all before. Growing up in rural Texas, she'd spent countless hours hunting with her grandfather, learning to shoot before she could properly tie her shoes. Her father had been a decorated Marine, killed in action when she was 15. She wore his dog tags under her uniform, a constant reminder of why she was here. "Martinez," barked Instructor Thompson, a weathered veteran with gray stubble and eyes like steel. "You're up first. Let's see if you can even hold a rifle without falling over." The range erupted in snickers. Some recruits made exaggerated betting gestures, wagering on how badly she would embarrass herself. Sarah ignored them, walking calmly to the firing line. She picked up the standard-issue M4 carbine, checking the weight and balance with practiced hands. 50 meters, 10 rounds, prone position," Thompson announced. "And sweetheart, try not to shoot the ceiling." More laughter. Sarah dropped to her belly, adjusting her position with fluid movements. She'd done this thousands of times, but never with so many eyes watching, waiting for her to fail. The whispers continued behind her. $20 says she misses the target completely. I'll take that bet. She'll probably drop the gun." Sarah breathed steadily, finding her natural respiratory pause. The target seemed small at 50 meters, but she'd hit smaller targets at greater distances. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "Steady hands, calm mind, trust your training." The first shot cracked across the range. A perfect bullseye. The laughter died slightly, but the comments continued. "Lucky shot. Beginner's luck won't last." 9 more shots followed in quick succession. Each one found the center ring with mechanical precision. When Thompson called ceasefire, Sarah stood and stepped back, her expression unchanged. Thompson walked to the spotting scope, his casual stride faltering as he examined the target. His eyebrows shot up. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The target came back on the automated retrieval system. 10 shots clustered in a group smaller than a golf ball, all within the bullseye. The range fell silent except for the wind whistling through the concrete barriers. "Fluke," someone called out, but the voice lacked conviction. "Jenkins, you're next," Thompson announced. Same drill. Private Jenkins, a cocky recruit from Chicago who'd been the loudest mocker, strutted to the line. His shots scattered across the target like buckshot, only 6 of 10 even hitting the scoring rings. He returned to the group red-faced and quiet. One by one, the other recruits took their turns. None came close to Sarah's performance. The best shooter managed a 4-inch group, respectable but nowhere near her level. "Interesting," Thompson said, studying his clipboard. "Martinez front and center." Sarah approached the instructor, maintaining perfect posture. Thompson studied her with new interest, his dismissive attitude evaporating. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that, recruit?" "My grandfather, sir. He taught me from age 7. "Your grandfather military?" "Korean War veteran, sir. Sniper." Thompson nodded slowly. "I see. Well, seems like Granddad knew what he was doing." He turned to address the group. "Gentlemen, let me introduce you to your new shooting standard. Anyone who can't match Martinez's performance by the end of the week gets extra duty." The announcement sent shockwaves through the group. Suddenly, the woman they'd been mocking was their benchmark. Sarah felt a small smile tug at her lips but kept her expression neutral. As the morning progressed, Thompson divided them into groups for various exercises. The mocking had stopped, replaced by curious glances and grudging respect. Some recruits approached her for shooting tips, their earlier arrogance forgotten. During the lunch break, Sarah sat alone at a picnic table, cleaning her rifle with methodical precision. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the base perimeter, heat waves shimmering in the distance. "Mind if I sit?" She looked up to see Private Chen, a quiet recruit from California who'd never joined in the morning's harassment. His rifle case lay open beside him, and he handled his weapon with obvious inexperience. "Free country," Sarah replied, returning to her cleaning. "I've never been much of a shooter," Chen admitted. Growing up in San Francisco, never had much opportunity. Think you could give me some pointers? Sarah studied him for a moment. His request seemed genuine, lacking the condescension she'd grown accustomed to. What's your biggest problem? Everything, Chen laughed nervously. I can barely hit the target, let alone the center. Show me your stance. Chen stood and raised an imaginary rifle. Sarah immediately spotted multiple issues with his form. Your foundation's all wrong, she explained, adjusting his feet positioning. Shooting's like building a house. If your foundation's crooked, everything else falls apart. For the next 20 minutes, she walked him through the fundamentals: breathing, sight alignment, trigger control. Chen listened intently, asking intelligent questions and taking notes. Why are you helping me? He asked as they finished. Sarah shrugged. My grandfather always said knowledge shared is knowledge doubled. When afternoon training resumed, Chen's improvement was noticeable. He managed to keep all his shots on target, earning a nod of approval from Thompson. As the day ended, Sarah packed her gear methodically. The initial shock of her performance had worn off, replaced by a grudging acceptance from most recruits. Some still harbored resentment, shooting dark looks her way when they thought she wasn't watching. Thompson approached as she headed toward the barracks. Martinez, walk with me. They strolled along the dusty path between buildings. The instructor seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I've been doing this for 20 years, he finally said. Seen thousands of recruits come through here. What you did today, that wasn't normal. Sir? That kind of precision, that level of control, it usually takes years to develop. You've got natural talent, but more than that, you've got training. Real training. Sarah nodded but said nothing. I'm recommending you for advanced placement, Thompson continued. Skip the basic marksmanship course, move straight to sniper school. The recommendation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Sniper school was the elite program, reserved for the very best shooters. It was also where her father had trained before his deployment. Think about it, Thompson said as they reached the barracks. Not many get this opportunity. That night, Sarah lay on her narrow bunk staring at the ceiling. Around her, other recruits slept or whispered quietly. The day had changed everything. She'd come here to prove herself, to honor her father's memory. Now she faced a choice that could define her entire military career. Outside, the desert wind howled against the windows, carrying with it the promise of challenges yet to come. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself at Fort Benning, home to the Army's most elite sniper training program. The facility sprawled across hundreds of acres of Georgia woodland, complete with mock urban environments and long-range shooting courses that stretched for miles. Her acceptance into the program had stirred controversy throughout the base. No woman had ever graduated from the advanced sniper course, though several had tried and failed. The instructors made no secret of their skepticism, and her fellow candidates ranged from openly hostile to cautiously curious. Welcome to hell, growled Master Sergeant Rodriguez during the opening briefing. He was a compact man with weathered hands and scars that told stories of multiple deployments. For the next 12 weeks, you'll be pushed beyond your limits. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. The few who remain will join the most elite group of warriors in the world. Sarah sat in the back row of the classroom, acutely aware of the 23 male candidates around her. They came from various military backgrounds: Rangers, Marines, Special Forces. Each had proven himself in combat or specialized training. She was the unknown quantity, the question mark that everyone wondered about. Martinez, Rodriguez called out, consulting his roster. Stand up. Sarah rose to her feet, maintaining military bearing despite feeling every eye in the room upon her. I see here you scored perfect on the preliminary marksmanship test, Rodriguez continued. Impressive. But this isn't about hitting stationary targets at known distances. This is about making impossible shots under combat conditions while someone's trying to kill you. Yes, Master Sergeant, Sarah replied crisply. We'll see what you're really made of soon enough. His gaze swept the room. The first phase is fieldcraft. You'll learn camouflage, stalking, observation, and field survival. If you can't move unseen through hostile territory, all the shooting skill in the world won't save you. The first week proved brutal. Sarah learned to crawl for hours through dense undergrowth, moving so slowly that progress was measured in feet rather than yards. Her uniform became permanently stained with mud, leaves, and camouflage paint. Instructors with trained eyes searched for the slightest movement. the smallest mistake that would mean discovery and failure. During one exercise, she spent 6 hours belly crawling across a 100-meter field, while instructors watched from elevated positions. The goal was to remain undetected while advancing to a designated firing position. Of the 24 candidates who started, only 8 successfully completed the stalk without being spotted. "Not bad, Martinez," commented Sergeant First Class Williams, the fieldcraft instructor, "but not good enough for real-world conditions. In Afghanistan, that level of concealment gets you killed." Sarah accepted the criticism without comment. She'd been raised to learn from failure, not make excuses for it. The physical demands were relentless. Each day began with a 5-mile run through the Georgia hills, followed by hours of technical instruction, then practical exercises that lasted until well after dark. Candidates dropped out regularly, some from injury, others simply unable to maintain the pace. By the end of the second week, the class had shrunk to 19 members. Sarah remained, though she'd accumulated a collection of cuts, bruises, and sore muscles that made every movement an exercise in pain management. The other candidates' attitudes toward her had evolved. The initial mockery had been replaced by grudging respect as she consistently performed among the top students. However, underlying tensions remained. "She's getting special treatment," Sarah overheard Specialist Morrison complaining to his bunkmate. "No way they'd push a male candidate through if he was struggling like she is." The accusation stung because it was partially true. Sarah was struggling, though not in the way Morrison suggested. The physical demands were manageable. She'd always been athletic and strong for her size. The challenge was mental and emotional. Every day brought reminders of her father. The instructors frequently referenced combat scenarios from Iraq and Afghanistan, theaters where her father had served. When they discussed sniper operations and the psychological toll of taking lives at long range, she thought about the demons that had haunted him even before his final deployment. The third week introduced long-range shooting, the core skill that separated snipers from regular marksmen. The range stretched across a valley, with targets placed at distances from 300 to 200 meters. Variables like wind speed, humidity, and temperature became critical factors in every shot. At 800 meters, a 5-mile-per-hour crosswind will push your bullet 18 inches off target, explained Chief Warrant Officer Brooks, the senior instructor. Miss those calculations, and instead of eliminating a threat, you've just announced your position to every enemy in the area. Sarah excelled at the mathematical calculations, quickly mastering the complex formulas that accounted for environmental factors. Her shots consistently grouped tightly at all distances, often outperforming candidates with years more experience. However, success bred resentment among some classmates. During a particularly challenging exercise involving multiple targets at varying distances, Sarah achieved the highest score of the day. As candidates cleaned their weapons afterward, the comments began. "Must be nice having lighter recoil sensitivity," muttered Corporal Jackson, a Marine with an attitude problem. "Yeah, smaller hands probably make the trigger control easier too," added Private Williams. Sarah methodically cleaned her rifle, ignoring the passive-aggressive comments. But Sergeant Chen, the recruit she'd helped during basic training and who had somehow made it into the program, wasn't having it. "Cut the crap," Chen said firmly. "She's out shooting all of us fair and square. Deal with it." "Stay out of this, Chen," Jackson warned. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when you're disrespecting a fellow soldier who's earned her place here." The tension escalated quickly. Jackson stood, his face flushed with anger. "Earned her place? She's only here because the Army needed a diversity poster child." Sarah finally looked up from her rifle. "Is that what you really think, Jackson?" "I think you're taking a spot that should belong to a real warfighter." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, other candidates stopped their activities to watch the confrontation unfold. "Interesting theory," Sarah said, setting down her cleaning rod. "Care to test it?" "What do you mean?" Sarah stood, her voice calm but carrying an edge that made everyone pay attention. "Tomorrow's the urban environment exercise. Sniper versus counter-sniper. You and me. Winner stays, loser packs their bags." The challenge was unprecedented. Students didn't typically engage in elimination competitions among themselves, but Jackson's ego wouldn't let him back down. "You're on," he said. "But when you wash out, remember that you asked for it." Word of the challenge spread through the barracks like wildfire. By evening, It seemed like everyone on base had heard about the showdown between the female recruit and the Marine who questioned her right to be there. Master Sergeant Rodriguez found Sarah on the observation deck, studying terrain maps of the training area where tomorrow's exercise would take place. "Heard you've got yourself a little side bet going," he said, settling into a chair beside her. "Not a bet, Master Sergeant. A point that needs proving." Rodriguez studied her profile in the dim light. "Jackson's a good shooter. 3 tours in Iraq, confirmed kills. He's not some basic training washout." "I understand that, Master Sergeant. Do you? Because if you lose tomorrow, it won't just be about you. Every woman who comes after you will have to carry that failure." "You sure you want that responsibility?" Sarah set down the map and looked directly at Rodriguez. "With respect, Master Sergeant, I've been carrying that responsibility since the day I arrived. Tomorrow just makes it official." The instructor nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But Martinez?" "Yes, Master Sergeant." "Don't just beat him. Destroy him. Make it so decisive that no one ever questions whether you belong here again." As Rodriguez left, Sarah returned to her maps. Tomorrow would determine not just her future, but potentially the future of every woman who dared to dream of joining the ranks of elite military snipers. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar burden, one she'd been preparing to carry her entire life. Dawn broke cold and gray over the mock urban environment known as Little Fallujah. The training facility replicated a Middle Eastern city with startling accuracy. Concrete buildings, narrow alleyways, rooftops perfect for sniper positions, and countless hiding spots where death could lurk unseen. Sarah arrived at the briefing room 30 minutes early, as was her habit. She'd spent the night studying building layouts and sightlines, memorizing every detail that might provide an advantage. Jackson entered shortly after, flanked by 2 Marine buddies who'd driven down from their base to watch the showdown. "Gentlemen and lady," Chief Brooks began, "today's exercise is hunter versus hunted. 2 snipers enter the urban environment from opposite ends. Each has 1 spotter. Mission is simple. Eliminate the opposing sniper before they eliminate you." The rules were straightforward but deadly serious. Paint ammunition would be used instead of live rounds, but the psychological intensity remained real. Motion sensors and cameras throughout the facility would track every movement, every shot, every tactical decision. "Martinez, you'll enter from the north side. Jackson, south side. You each have 4 hours to complete the mission. Spotters will be provided by instructor staff to ensure neutrality." Sarah's spotter turned out to be Sergeant Williams, the fieldcraft instructor who'd been particularly hard on her during training. Jackson received Staff Sergeant Coleman, a veteran with multiple deployments and a reputation for tactical excellence. "Listen up, Martinez," Williams said as they geared up. "Jackson's got experience, but you've got something he doesn't." "What's that, Sergeant?" "He's angry." "Angry people make mistakes." Williams shouldered his pack. "Stay calm, trust your training, and let him defeat himself." The urban environment felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. Shadows created pools of concealment, but also potential death traps. Sarah and Williams entered through the north gate, immediately seeking cover behind a burnt-out vehicle. "First rule of urban sniping," Williams whispered. "Never stay in one position longer than necessary. The environment is your weapon, but it's also your enemy." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the buildings ahead. Jackson would be moving through the southern section, probably heading for the highest available position. Most snipers thought in terms of elevation advantage, but Sarah had learned from her grandfather that sometimes the best shot came from an unexpected angle. They moved through the streets like ghosts, using building shadows and abandoned vehicles for concealment. Sarah's fieldcraft training paid dividends as she navigated the urban maze without triggering any of the motion sensors that would reveal her position. "Contact," Williams whispered, pointing toward a 3rd-story window 3 blocks away. Muzzle flash reflection. Sarah studied the building through her scope. Jackson had positioned himself well, with good sight lines covering the main approaches. But his position also revealed his thinking, conventional, predictable. "He's in the abandoned hotel," Sarah observed. "Good fields of fire, multiple escape routes. How do you want to play this?" Sarah continued scanning the area, her mind working through possibilities. Jackson's position was strong but not perfect. The building's height advantage came with limitations. "He's thinking like a Marine," she finally said. "Secure the high ground, dominate the battlefield." And that's wrong because this isn't a battlefield. It's a city. Cities have rules that mountains don't. Sarah led Williams on a circuitous route through the urban environment, avoiding the main streets that Jackson would be watching. Instead, she moved through back alleys and building courtyards, places that offered no sight lines for a roof-based sniper. 20 minutes into the exercise, they reached a drainage canal that ran beneath the city streets. Sarah studied the tunnel entrance, calculating distances and angles. "You're not seriously considering the sewers," Williams said. "Underground movement eliminates visual detection," Sarah replied. "Plus, it puts us inside his defensive perimeter." Williams shook his head but followed as Sarah descended into the tunnel system. The underground route was claustrophobic and disorienting, but it allowed them to move unseen beneath Jackson's watchful eyes. They emerged 2 blocks from Jackson's building, behind a low wall that provided concealment. Sarah immediately began scanning for her target, knowing that Jackson would be doing the same. "There," Williams whispered. "Third floor, center window." Sarah found Jackson in her scope. He was positioned professionally, rifle steady, eyes scanning the approaches. His spotter sat beside him, methodically searching for threats through binoculars. The range was 340 meters, well within Sarah's capability. But the shot required threading between several obstacles: a partially collapsed wall, hanging power lines, and debris that could deflect the paint round. "Winds coming from the southeast at about 8 miles per hour, Williams reported. "Humidity's high from last night's rain." Sarah made the calculations automatically, adjusting her scope accordingly. But she didn't take the shot. Instead, she continued observing, looking for patterns in Jackson's behavior. "What are you waiting for?" Williams whispered. "You have a clear shot." "Patient," Sarah replied. "He's good, but he's also human. Humans have patterns." For the next 15 minutes, Sarah watched Jackson's routine. Every 3 minutes, he would scan left, then right, then return to center. Every 8 minutes, he would check his rear security. Every 12 minutes, he would shift position slightly to relieve muscle tension. "Now I understand his rhythm," Sarah said. "He's running a standard surveillance pattern. Textbook but predictable." Sarah began to move again, not toward Jackson, but away from him. Williams followed reluctantly as she led them to an abandoned auto repair shop 4 blocks from Jackson's position. "This is getting ridiculous," Williams muttered. "We're moving away from the target." "No," Sarah corrected. "We're moving to where the target will be." The auto shop had been damaged by simulated bombing, leaving the upper floor partially collapsed. Sarah climbed carefully through the debris until she reached a position that offered a clear view of Jackson's building. But more importantly, it offered a view of the fire escape he would use if forced to relocate. "You're betting he'll move," Williams realized. "I'm making sure he has to move," Sarah replied. She lined up a shot on the window frame next to Jackson's position, not at Jackson himself. The paint round struck the concrete with a sharp crack, close enough to Jackson that he would know his position was compromised. Through her scope, Sarah watched Jackson's immediate response. He grabbed his rifle and began moving toward the fire escape, exactly as she'd predicted. "He's relocating," Williams reported unnecessarily. "And moving into my kill zone," Sarah finished. Jackson appeared on the fire escape 30 seconds later, moving quickly but not recklessly. He was still a professional, even under pressure. But his training was working against him now, making his movements predictable. Sarah tracked him through her scope, waiting for the perfect moment. Jackson paused at the second-floor landing, scanning for threats before continuing his descent. The shot was textbook perfect. The paint round struck Jackson's center mass, marking him as eliminated. The motion sensors throughout the facility confirmed the hit, and air horns sounded to signal the end of the exercise. "Exercise complete," came the radio announcement. "Martinez achieves mission success." Williams lowered his binoculars and studied Sarah with new respect. "That was masterful. You didn't just outshoot him, you outthought him." "My grandfather always said the mind is the sniper's primary weapon," Sarah replied, safing her rifle. "Everything else is just tools." They made their way back to the debriefing area where Jackson and his team were already waiting. The Marine's expression was a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. Chief Brooks conducted the after-action review with clinical precision, breaking down every decision made by both teams. The consensus was clear. Sarah had demonstrated superior tactical thinking and patience under pressure. Jackson, Your positioning was solid and your shooting skills remain excellent, Brooks concluded. But you fell into predictable patterns that an observant opponent could exploit. Jackson nodded stiffly. Understood, Chief. Brooks turned to Sarah. Martinez, your indirect approach was unconventional but effective. You recognized that this wasn't just a shooting exercise, it was a thinking exercise. After the formal debriefing, Jackson approached Sarah privately. His earlier hostility had been replaced by something that might have been respect. I owe you an apology, he said, and an acknowledgement. You earned this, Sarah nodded. We all earn our place here every day, Jackson. Today was just more visible than usual. That evening, word of the exercise had spread throughout the base. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being approached by other candidates who wanted to learn from her tactical approach. How did you know he'd use the fire escape? Asked Private Torres, a young soldier from Texas. Everyone has patterns, Sarah explained. Training creates habits, and habits can be predicted if you observe carefully enough. But what if he'd gone out the back instead? Then I would have been wrong and he would have won, Sarah admitted. Good tactics reduce risk, they don't eliminate it. As the group dispersed, Sergeant Chen approached her with a knowing smile. Remember back in basic training when you helped me with my shooting stance? Of course. You said knowledge shared is knowledge doubled. Looks like that philosophy's serving you well here too. Sarah considered that as she prepared for bed that night. The victory over Jackson had been important, not just for her own confidence but for proving a larger point. But she was beginning to understand that true leadership wasn't about winning individual battles. It was about lifting others up while pursuing excellence yourself. Her grandfather had taught her to shoot, but her father had taught her something equally valuable, that serving others was the highest form of service. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of skill and character. But tonight, for the first time since arriving at Fort Benning, Sarah felt like she truly belonged. 6 weeks into the program, Sarah had established herself as one of the top students in the class. The initial group of 24 candidates had dwindled to 14, with dropouts coming from injury, academic failure, or simple inability to handle the psychological pressure. The training had evolved from basic fieldcraft to advanced scenarios that simulated real combat conditions. Students now faced complex missions involving multiple targets, civilian populations, and split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Sarah sat in the briefing room alongside her remaining classmates, studying the mission parameters for their most challenging exercise yet. Master Sergeant Rodriguez stood at the front, his expression more serious than usual. Gentlemen and Martinez, he began, today's exercise is different. We've received intelligence that a high-value target will be meeting with known terrorists in a simulated village environment. Your mission is to eliminate the target while minimizing civilian casualties. The briefing included detailed maps of Riverside Village, a training facility that replicated a typical Middle Eastern settlement, complete with market squares, residential areas, and civilian role players who would be moving throughout the environment during the mission. The complication, Rodriguez continued, is that our target will be surrounded by civilians at all times. You'll need to identify him from a distance, track his movements, and wait for a clean shot opportunity that won't endanger innocent lives. Sarah studied the aerial photographs of the village. The buildings were closely packed, with narrow streets and multiple levels. Sightlines were limited, and the presence of civilian role players would make target identification extremely challenging. Teams of 2 will insert at different times throughout the day, Rodriguez explained. Each team gets one chance. Miss your opportunity and the target escapes. Hit a civilian and you've just created an international incident. Sarah was paired with Corporal Davis, a quiet soldier from Montana, who'd consistently performed well in training. They drew the afternoon insertion slot, which meant dealing with challenging light conditions and maximum civilian activity. This is the kind of mission that ends careers, Davis observed as they studied the intelligence photos. Too many variables, too much that can go wrong. Or the kind that defines them, Sarah replied. Every shot we've taken in training has been building to this moment. Their target was a man named Hassan al-Rashid, played by one of the instructor staff. The photos showed a middle-aged man with a distinctive beard and traditional clothing. However, several civilian role players would be dressed similarly, creating multiple potential false targets. As they prepared their equipment, Sarah noticed something in the intelligence briefing that others might have missed. Al-Rashid had a specific walking pattern, favoring his left leg due to an old injury. It was a small detail, but one that could help differentiate him from similarly dressed civilians. "Did you catch the reference to his mobility issues?" Sarah asked Davis. "The left leg thing?" "Yeah, but how's that supposed to help us from 400 meters away?" "Gait analysis. Everyone walks differently. If we know what to look for, we can identify him even when his face isn't visible." They made their way to the insertion point at 1400 hours, when the afternoon sun would be creating challenging shadows and heat shimmer. The village was already bustling with activity, as civilian role players went about their simulated daily routines. Sarah and Davis found a concealed position on a hillside overlooking the village. The range to the market square where Al-Rashid was expected to appear measured 380 meters. Well, within Sarah's capability, but the shot would require threading between power lines and around building corners. "Target's supposed to appear sometime between 1430 and 1500, Davis reported, scanning the village through his spotting scope. "Could be anywhere in that market area." Sarah settled into her shooting position, adjusting her rifle rest and checking her scope settings. The afternoon heat was creating significant heat shimmer, which would affect bullet trajectory and target identification. "Multiple similar-looking males in the target area," Davis observed. "This is going to be like finding a needle in a haystack." "Patience," Sarah replied, echoing her grandfather's favorite advice. "Good hunting requires good waiting." At 1445, several men in traditional dress entered the market square. Two matched the general description of their target, but Sarah waited. She watched their movement patterns, looking for the specific gait characteristics mentioned in the briefing. "Possible target, north side of the fountain," Davis called out. Sarah tracked the man through her scope. His dress matched, his build was similar, but his walking pattern was wrong. Too fluid, too natural. Al-Rashid should show signs of favoring his left leg. "Negative," Sarah said. "Movement's not right." They waited another 10 minutes before a third man appeared. This one moved differently, with a subtle but noticeable limp. More importantly, he was being accompanied by two other men who seemed to be providing security. "That's him," Sarah said with quiet confidence. Southwest corner, talking to the vendor. Davis adjusted his scope. "How can you be sure?" "Watch how he shifts weight to his right leg when he stops. Classic compensation for left leg weakness." Al-Rashid moved through the market, stopping at various vendors while his security team maintained a discreet perimeter. Sarah tracked him patiently, waiting for a clear shot opportunity that wouldn't endanger the civilian role players around him. "Wind's picking up," Davis reported. "Southwest to northeast, about 6 miles per hour." Sarah made the mental calculations, adjusting her point of aim accordingly. But she still didn't take the shot. Al-Rashid remained surrounded by civilians, and any missed shot could result in simulated casualties. "You've got multiple opportunities," Davis whispered. "What are you waiting for?" "The right opportunity," Sarah replied. "One shot, one kill, 0 collateral damage." At 1452, Al-Rashid began moving toward the village mosque. The route would take him past a narrow alley where the civilian foot traffic was lighter. Sarah tracked his progress, predicting where he would be when he reached the optimal shooting zone. "Alley approach in 30 seconds, she announced. "Winds still variable," Davis warned. "This heat's creating unpredictable air currents." Sarah controlled her breathing, entering the zone of absolute focus that separated elite shooters from ordinary marksmen. The world narrowed to the view through her scope, the feel of the trigger and the mathematics of ballistics. Al-Rashid appeared at the mouth of the alley, walking with his characteristic limp. For a brief moment, he was separated from civilians by approximately 3 meters on each side. The shot window would last perhaps 2 seconds. Sarah's finger found the trigger. The crosshairs settled on Al-Rashid's center mass. She exhaled slowly, finding her natural respiratory pause. The shot broke clean and true. The paint round struck Al-Rashid in the chest, marking him as eliminated. He immediately raised his hands and called out, "Hit!" to signal a successful mission completion. "Confirmed kill," Davis reported. "No civilian casualties." The exercise controllers confirmed the successful mission completion over the radio. Al-Rashid walked over to their position, staying in character until he reached their hide site. "Outstanding shot," he said, dropping his role-playing persona. "Textbook patience and execution." During the after-action review, Chief Brooks highlighted Sarah's performance as exemplary. Martinez demonstrated the kind of tactical patience that separates snipers from assassins, he noted. Anyone can pull a trigger. Few can wait for the perfect moment. However, not all feedback was positive. Some candidates questioned whether Sarah's cautious approach would work in actual combat conditions, where hesitation could mean mission failure. In real combat, you might not get a perfect shot opportunity, argued Specialist Morrison. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks. True, Brooks acknowledged. But Martinez made a tactical decision based on mission parameters. The objective was to eliminate the target without civilian casualties. Mission accomplished. That evening, Sarah found herself reflecting on the exercise while cleaning her rifle. The technical aspects had been straightforward, but the psychological pressure of making life and death decisions weighed heavily on her mind. Sergeant Chen approached, carrying his own weapon for cleaning. Mind if I join you? Free country, Sarah replied, using her standard response. They worked in comfortable silence for several minutes before Chen spoke again. You know, watching you work today reminded me of something my grandfather used to say about fishing. What's that? He said the fish don't care how many times you cast your line. They only care about the one time you do it right. Sarah considered this wisdom while running a cleaning rod through her rifle barrel. Your grandfather sounds like a smart man. He was. Fought in Vietnam, came home and never talked about it. But he taught me patience through fishing. Chen paused in his cleaning. Today you showed everyone what real patience looks like under pressure. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Master Sergeant Rodriguez. His expression was more serious than usual, and he carried a folder marked with classified stamps. Martinez, I need to speak with you privately. Sarah secured her rifle and followed Rodriguez to his office. The small room was filled with commendations, photographs from various deployments, and a wall map showing current conflict zones around the world. Sit, Rodriguez commanded, settling behind his desk. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Sarah nodded, suddenly aware that her life was about to change again. Your performance in training has caught attention at higher levels, Rodriguez began, specifically from people who deal with very specialized missions. He opened the classified folder and extracted several photographs. They showed a compound in what appeared to be a mountainous desert region, with detailed architectural diagrams and satellite imagery. 3 weeks ago, intelligence assets identified a high-value target in this location, Rodriguez continued. Someone we've been hunting for over 2 years. The problem is access. Sarah studied the photographs. The compound was built into a mountainside, surrounded by natural barriers that would make conventional assault extremely difficult. The target rarely leaves the compound, and when he does, it's under heavy security, Rodriguez explained. Standard special operations approaches have been deemed too risky due to civilian populations in the area. What does this have to do with me, Master Sergeant? Rodriguez leaned forward. The mission requires a single precision shot from extreme range. We're talking about 100-200 meters uphill, in variable wind conditions. Miss and the target disappears forever. Hit a civilian and we create an international incident. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They were discussing a real mission with real consequences. Her training had suddenly become preparation for actual combat. The shot would be taken from this ridge, Rodriguez continued, pointing to a topographical map. Natural concealment, good sight lines, but extremely challenging environmental conditions. Sarah studied the terrain carefully. The shooting position would be at significant elevation, with the target compound nestled in a valley below. Wind patterns in mountainous terrain were notoriously unpredictable, and the range was at the absolute limit of even the most advanced sniper rifles. Who else is being considered for this mission? No one, Rodriguez replied simply. Your combination of technical skill and tactical patience makes you the only candidate we're seriously considering. The weight of that statement settled on Sarah's shoulders. They weren't just asking her to complete a training exercise. They were asking her to take a human life from over 3/4 of a mile away. I need to think about this, Sarah said quietly. Understood. But understand this. If you accept, you'll be extracted from the training program immediately for specialized mission preparation. Your class would graduate without you. Sarah nodded, understanding the full implications. Accepting the mission would mean abandoning her goal of completing the sniper course through normal channels. But it would also mean serving her country in the most direct way possible. How long do I have to decide? 48 hours, Rodriguez replied. After that, we moved to alternative options. As Sarah left the office, her mind raced with possibilities and implications. The mission represented everything she'd trained for, the ultimate test of her skills and dedication. But it also represented a point of no return. Walking across the base in the Georgia twilight, she thought about her father and the choices that had led to his death in a distant land. She thought about her grandfather and the wisdom he'd passed down through countless hours of patient instruction. Most of all, she thought about the responsibility that came with exceptional ability. Some people were given gifts not for personal glory, but for service to something greater than themselves. The next morning brought news that would complicate her decision even further. During breakfast, word spread through the mess hall that terrorist attacks had struck 3 European cities simultaneously. The enemy they'd been training to fight had once again demonstrated their willingness to target innocent civilians. As Sarah read the news reports on her phone, she noticed a name mentioned in connection with one of the attacks. The same name that had been in the classified folder Rodriguez had shown her the night before. The decision was becoming clearer, even as it became more difficult. Sarah spent the next 24 hours in careful consideration, weighing the decision that would define the rest of her military career. She walked the training grounds alone, thinking about duty, sacrifice, and the price of exceptional ability. That evening, she placed a video call to her mother back in Texas. Maria Martinez still lived in the same small house where Sarah had grown up, surrounded by photographs of her deceased husband and memories of a family forever changed by war. "You look tired, Mija," her mother observed through the computer screen. "The training is hard?" "It's challenging," Sarah replied carefully, unable to discuss the classified details. "Mom, can I ask you something about Dad?" Maria's expression softened. "Of course. When he volunteered for that last deployment, did you try to stop him?" Her mother was quiet for a long moment, studying Sarah's face through the pixelated connection. "Your father felt called to serve," she finally said. "Not by the army, but by something deeper. He said some people are given abilities not for themselves, but for others. Did you agree with him?" "I was terrified," Maria admitted. "But I also knew that trying to keep him from following his conscience would have destroyed the man I loved." She paused. "Why are you asking me this?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "I'm facing a decision about my future, a big one." "Then remember what your grandfather taught you about hunting," her mother said. "Sometimes the biggest game requires the greatest risk. But you don't take that risk unless you're absolutely certain you can make the shot." After ending the call, Sarah sat in her empty barracks room, finally understanding what her decision would be. The next morning, she knocked on Master Sergeant Rodriguez's office door at precisely 600 hours. "I accept the mission," she said without preamble. Rodriguez nodded, as if he'd never doubted her answer. "Pack your gear. Transport leaves in 2 hours." The extraction from Fort Benning happened with military efficiency. One moment, Sarah was saying goodbye to her remaining classmates. The next, she was on a military transport aircraft bound for an undisclosed location. Sergeant Chen caught her at the airfield. "Whatever this is about, watch your 6 out there," he said, using military slang for staying alert to threats. "Take care of the others," Sarah replied. "Make sure they remember that earning respect is harder than demanding it." The flight took her to a special operations base in Virginia, where she met her mission team for the first time. They were an elite group, intelligence specialists, communications experts, and a medic trained in combat trauma. But Sarah was the only shooter. "Welcome to Task Force Nightingale," said Colonel Sarah Hayes, a stern woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. "For the next 2 weeks, this team will prepare for a mission that doesn't officially exist." The briefing room contained detailed models of the target compound, weather data going back 5 years, and ballistics computers loaded with every variable that could affect a long-range shot. "Your target is Rashid Al-Masri," Colonel Hayes continued, operations commander for the terrorist cell responsible for yesterday's attacks in Europe. "He's been planning similar operations against American targets." The photographs showed a man in his 40s, bearded and serious. Intelligence reports indicated he was highly educated, spoke multiple languages, and had been recruiting operatives throughout Europe and North America. Al-Masri rarely leaves his compound, and when he does, it's under heavy security through populated areas. the intelligence officer explained. Our analysts have identified only one viable opportunity. The plan was complex but elegant. Intelligence assets had learned that Al-Masri would be visiting a specific location within the compound at a precise time, conducting a meeting with international contacts. For approximately 10 minutes, he would be visible from the shooting position they'd identified. The shot is 1,247 meters, the ballistics specialist reported, uphill angle of approximately 12 degrees. Historical weather data suggests variable winds, typically ranging from 5 to 15 miles per hour. Sarah studied the topographical data carefully. The shooting position was a natural rock formation that would provide excellent concealment but limited maneuverability. Once in position, she would be committed to the shot until mission completion. What's the extraction plan? Sarah asked. There isn't one, Colonel Hayes replied bluntly. If the shot is successful, you'll have approximately 15 minutes before enemy forces reach your position. That's enough time to reach the extraction zone, but only if everything goes perfectly. The training for the mission was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Every day brought new challenges designed to replicate the exact conditions she would face. They built mock-ups of the shooting position, created wind machines to simulate environmental conditions, and practiced the shot sequence until it became automatic. At this range, you'll have approximately 1.8 seconds of flight time, the ballistics instructor explained. Any movement by the target during that window means a miss. Sarah spent hours studying video footage of Al-Masri, learning his mannerisms and movement patterns. Like all humans, he had habits. How he stood, how he gestured when speaking, how he positioned himself relative to others. He favors his right side when addressing groups, the intelligence analyst noted. Probably due to hearing loss in his left ear from an old injury. If he's conducting a meeting, he'll position himself to maximize his good ear. The psychological preparation was as important as the technical training. Military psychologists worked with Sarah to prepare her mentally for taking a human life at extreme range, something different from the close combat scenarios most soldiers experienced. Long-range shooting creates a different kind of psychological stress, Dr. Elizabeth Norton explained. You have time to think, to see your target as a human being rather than just a threat. That can create hesitation at the critical moment. How do I prevent that? Focus on the mission, not the man. You're not killing Rashid Al-Masri, the person. You're eliminating a threat to innocent lives. 2 weeks after arriving at the Virginia facility, Sarah found herself on another transport aircraft, this time bound for a staging area in Eastern Europe. The mission was now less than 72 hours away. The final briefing took place in a nondescript building on a military base whose name she was never told. Intelligence updates confirmed that Al-Masri was still in the target compound and that the meeting was proceeding as scheduled. Weather forecast for mission day shows partly cloudy skies, temperatures in the low 70s and variable winds, the meteorologist reported. Conditions are optimal for the shot. Colonel Hayes provided the final mission overview. Insert time is 0300 hours local. You'll have 6 hours to reach the shooting position and prepare. Target window opens at 0900 and closes at 0910. One shot, one opportunity. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the mocking laughter at the basic training range to the most important shot of her military career, everything had been building toward tomorrow. She thought about her father, who had made his own choice to serve despite the risks. She thought about her grandfather, whose patient instruction had given her the skills to make a difference. Most of all, she thought about the innocent people who would live or die based on her ability to make an impossible shot under perfect conditions. At 200 hours, she was awakened for final mission preparation. In 1 hour, she would insert into hostile territory to attempt a shot that would test every skill she'd ever learned and every principle she'd ever believed in. The time for preparation was over. The time for action had begun. The helicopter insertion happened in complete darkness, 3 miles from the target compound. Sarah and her support team rappelled onto a barren hillside, their equipment secured in specialized packs designed for long-range reconnaissance missions. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, her spotter for the mission, landed beside her with practiced silence. A veteran of multiple deployments, Torres had worked with several elite snipers and understood the unique pressures of extreme-range missions. 6 hours to shooting position, Torres whispered, checking his GPS device. Terrain's going to be challenging. The route to their hide site led through rocky terrain that would provide concealment, but slow their movement significantly. Every step had to be calculated to avoid creating noise or leaving traces that enemy patrols might discover. Sarah adjusted her pack, feeling the weight of the specialized rifle and ammunition she would need for the shot. The weapon was a custom-built system optimized for extreme range accuracy, capable of precision that seemed almost supernatural. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, using night vision equipment to navigate the treacherous terrain. The compound was visible in the distance, its lights creating a small constellation against the black landscape. After 4 hours of careful movement, they reached the shooting position. It was exactly as the reconnaissance photos had shown, a natural rock formation that provided excellent concealment and clear sight lines to the target area. Sarah immediately began setting up her rifle, using a bipod system that would provide the stability necessary for the extreme range shot. Torres established his observation post slightly behind her, where he could provide wind readings and target confirmation. Range to target, 1,247 meters confirmed, Torres reported quietly. Elevation angle, 12 degrees, 4 minutes. Sarah settled into her shooting position, adjusting the rifle until it felt like a natural extension of her body. Through her scope, she could see the compound clearly. Early morning light was beginning to illuminate the buildings where Al-Masri would soon appear. The wait began. For the next 2 hours, Sarah remained motionless in her position. The mental discipline required for this kind of patience was perhaps the most challenging aspect of long-range sniping. Every minute felt like an hour, but any movement could compromise their position. Wind picking up from the southwest, Torres observed. 8 to 10 miles per hour, variable direction. Sarah made mental notes of the wind conditions, knowing they would continue to change throughout the morning. At extreme range, even small variations in wind speed or direction could cause a miss. At 08:45 hours, movement appeared in the compound. Several vehicles arrived and men in traditional dress emerged. Through her scope, Sarah could see Al-Masri greeting his guests, exactly as intelligence had predicted. Target confirmed, Torres whispered. Al-Masri visible in the courtyard. Sarah tracked her target through the scope, noting his movements and positioning. Al-Masri moved with confidence, gesturing animatedly as he spoke with his visitors. He had no idea that death was watching him from over 3/4 of a mile away. The group moved toward the meeting location, a covered pavilion where they would conduct their business. Intelligence had predicted that Al-Masri would position himself at the head of the group, with his back to a stone wall that would provide Sarah with the clearest shot. Target moving to meeting location, Sarah reported into her radio. Copy. You are cleared hot when target is in position, came the response. From the Tactical Operations Center, at 08:58 hours, Al-Masri took his position exactly where intelligence had predicted. He stood facing his guests, his body clearly visible through Sarah's scope. The shooting window was now open. Wind steady from southwest, 9 miles per hour, Torres reported. No change in direction for the past 3 minutes. Sarah made her final calculations, adjusting her point of aim to account for wind drift, bullet drop, and the uphill angle. At 1,247 meters, the bullet would take approximately 1.8 seconds to reach the target, traveling in a precise arc that accounted for gravity and atmospheric conditions. Through her scope, she could see Al-Masri clearly. He was speaking to his assembled guests, probably discussing plans that would result in more innocent deaths if allowed to proceed. Sarah controlled her breathing, finding the natural respiratory pause that would provide the steadiest shooting platform. Her finger found the trigger, applying the careful pressure that years of training had made automatic. The crosshairs settled on Al-Masri's center mass. Everything else faded away, the distant compound, the rocky terrain around her, even Torres breathing quietly beside her. The world narrowed to the view through her scope and the mathematics of ballistics. At 09:02 hours, Sarah fired. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder with familiar force. Through her scope, she tracked the bullet's path across the empty space between her position and the target. Time seemed suspended as the projectile traveled its predetermined course. Seconds later, Al-Masri suddenly stumbled and fell. The other men in the pavilion immediately began shouting and seeking cover, Their peaceful meeting transformed into chaos. Hit confirmed, Torres reported. Target down, Sarah didn't celebrate. There was no time for satisfaction or relief. Enemy forces would already be mobilizing to locate the source of the shot, and their extraction window was rapidly closing. Pack it up, Sarah ordered, beginning the process of securing her rifle. We've got 15 minutes to reach the extraction zone. They moved with desperate efficiency, breaking down their equipment while maintaining situational awareness. In the distance, vehicles were already moving from the compound toward their general area. The extraction route led down the opposite side of the ridge, toward a small valley where their helicopter would meet them. The terrain was treacherous, with loose rocks and steep grades that threatened to send them tumbling into the ravine below. Movement on the ridgeline, Torres reported, spotting enemy soldiers beginning their search pattern. They're approximately 20 minutes behind us. Sarah increased her pace, knowing that being captured would mean torture and death, probably after providing intelligence about American special operations capabilities. Failure was not an option. They reached the extraction zone with 3 minutes to spare. The helicopter appeared on schedule, landing in a cloud of dust and debris. Sarah and Torres ran for the aircraft, diving through the open door as the pilot immediately lifted off. As they gained altitude, Sarah looked back at the compound where Al-Masri had fallen. Enemy soldiers were still searching the ridgeline, but they would find nothing except some disturbed rocks and faint impressions in the dirt. Mission successful, Torres reported into his radio. Package delivered. Team extracted safely. The flight back to the staging base passed in silence. Sarah cleaned her rifle mechanically, her mind processing what had just occurred. She had taken a human life from an impossible distance under perfect conditions. The technical aspects had been flawless, but the emotional weight was just beginning to settle in. Back at the base, Colonel Hayes conducted the mission debrief with characteristic efficiency. Intelligence confirmed that Al-Masri was dead, and that his terrorist network had been significantly disrupted by the loss of their operations commander. Outstanding work, Hayes concluded. This mission will save innocent lives, though that fact will never be publicly acknowledged. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, thinking about the day's events. She had accomplished something that few people in human history could achieve, eliminating a specific threat from over 3/4 of a mile away. But the technical achievement felt secondary to the larger questions about duty, sacrifice, and the price of serving something greater than oneself. Her father's dog tags hung around her neck, a reminder of the choice she had made to follow in his footsteps. Today she had proven worthy of that legacy, but she also understood that every victory in war came with its own burdens. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new tests of skill and character. But tonight she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction in knowing that her grandfather's patient instruction and her father's example of service had prepared her for this moment. The mocking laughter from that first day at the shooting range seemed like a lifetime ago. The young woman who had endured those taunts had become someone capable of changing the course of history with a single perfectly placed shot. But the real test would be what came next. 3 months after the mission, Sarah found herself back at Fort Benning, but this time as an instructor rather than a student. The successful elimination of Al-Masri had earned her immediate promotion and recognition within the special operations community. Though the details remained classified, she stood before a new class of sniper candidates, 26 men and 2 women who represented the latest group, hoping to join the elite ranks. The sight of female candidates was no longer unusual, a change that Sarah had helped bring about through her own success. "Welcome to the Advanced Sniper Program," Sarah began, her voice carrying the authority that came from proven experience. "Over the next 12 weeks, you'll be tested in ways that will push you beyond your perceived limitations." Among the new students was Private Jessica Chen, Sergeant Chen's younger sister, who had followed her brother's recommendation to apply for the program. Sarah recognized the family resemblance immediately, as well as the determined expression that reminded her of her own early days. The training curriculum had evolved since Sarah's time as a student. Her mission success had provided valuable lessons that were now incorporated into the standard instruction. Students learned about extreme range shooting, environmental factors at extended distances, and the psychological preparation required for high-stakes missions. Instructor Martinez, called out one of the male candidates during a break in classroom instruction. Is it true you made a confirmed kill at over 200 meters? Sarah considered her response carefully. The specifics remained classified, but the general achievement had become part of sniper community legend. I've been fortunate to serve in situations where my training made a difference, she replied diplomatically. What matters is that each of you develops the skills to make similar contributions when called upon. The weeks that followed brought familiar challenges, as the new class worked through the same progression that Sarah had experienced. Fieldcraft exercises, shooting competitions, and tactical scenarios that tested both technical skills and decision-making under pressure. Sarah found herself paying particular attention to Private Chen, not because of family connections, but because the young woman displayed the same combination of natural talent and dedicated work ethic that separated good shooters from great ones. Chen, stay after class, Sarah said following a particularly challenging stalking exercise. The young private approached with obvious nervousness. Did I do something wrong, instructor? On the contrary, your fieldcraft today was exceptional for someone with your limited experience. Where did you learn to move so quietly? My grandfather taught my brother and me to hunt when we were kids, Chen explained. He always said that patience and observation were more important than shooting ability. Sarah smiled, remembering similar lessons from her own grandfather. Smart man. Have you considered applying for specialized training after you complete this program? I just want to graduate first, instructor. One challenge at a time. Good attitude. But start thinking about what comes next. The military needs people with your potential. As the training program progressed, Sarah began receiving inquiries about other classified missions. Her success with the Al-Masri operation had established her reputation within the special operations community, and commanders were eager to utilize her unique skills. Colonel Hayes visited Fort Benning to discuss potential future assignments. They met in Sarah's office, a small space decorated with commendations and photographs from her training days. How are you adjusting to the instructor role? Hayes asked. It's rewarding, Sarah replied honestly. I'm seeing students develop skills that could save lives in future operations. Good, but I suspect you're also missing the operational side of the job. Sarah considered this observation. Teaching was satisfying, but part of her did miss the intensity and importance of direct missions. There's another situation developing, Hayes continued, placing a classified folder on the desk. Similar to your last mission, but potentially more challenging. Sarah opened the folder, revealing satellite photographs of a compound in a different part of the world. The target details were familiar. High-value individual, extreme-range shot requirement, minimal collateral damage tolerance. This one's even more difficult, Hayes explained. The range is nearly 2,400 meters, and environmental conditions are significantly more challenging. When would this mission take place? We need an answer within the week. Training would begin immediately, mission execution within 6 weeks. Sarah studied the mission details, recognizing both the technical challenges and the strategic importance. The target was responsible for coordinating attacks against American interests worldwide, and eliminating him would significantly disrupt terrorist operations. Can I finish the current training cycle first? Sarah asked. These students are 6 weeks from graduation. Negative. If you accept, you'd need to transfer instructor duties immediately. The choice represented a familiar dilemma: personal satisfaction versus operational necessity. Sarah's current students would suffer from losing their primary instructor mid-program, but future victims of terrorism might be saved by her accepting the mission. That evening, Sarah walked the Fort Benning training ranges where her own journey had begun. The desert air carried the same smells of gun oil and determination that had welcomed her as a nervous recruit. Now she returned as a proven operator, facing choices that would define the rest of her career. Private Chen approached as Sarah completed her evening rounds. Instructor Martinez, could I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret choosing this path? The uncertainty, the danger, the constant pressure to prove yourself. Sarah considered the question seriously. The young woman deserved an honest answer. Every choice has costs, Sarah replied. But regret comes from wondering what if, not from pursuing something you believe in completely. Even when that pursuit requires sacrifices? Especially then. The most important missions always require the greatest sacrifices. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, instructor. That helps clarify some things for me." As the young private walked away, Sarah realized that her own answer had clarified things for her as well. The next morning, she knocked on Colonel Hayes's door at precisely 0600 hours. "I accept the mission," she said without preamble. Hayes nodded, as if she'd never doubted the answer. "Your replacement instructor arrives this afternoon. Pack your gear." Sarah spent her final hours at Fort Benning ensuring a smooth transition for her students. She met individually with each candidate, providing personalized guidance that would help them succeed under new instruction. "Chen," she said during their final meeting, "you have the potential to be exceptional at this. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Will I see you again, instructor? Maybe. But whether you do or not, remember that earning respect is harder than demanding it. Lead by example and others will follow." As Sarah boarded the transport aircraft that would take her to another classified location, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From enduring mockery at a basic training range to becoming one of the military's most valuable precision assets, every challenge had prepared her for the next level of service. The aircraft lifted off into the Georgia sky, carrying her toward another impossible mission. Behind her, a new generation of snipers continued their training, benefiting from lessons she had learned through trial, error, and ultimate success. The cycle continued, as it always had and always would. Young men and women would face their own moments of doubt and testing, their own choices between safety and service. Some would rise to meet extraordinary challenges, while others would find different ways to contribute. But for Sarah Martinez, the path forward remained clear. Somewhere in the world, there was another impossible shot waiting to be made, another threat to innocent lives that needed to be eliminated. Her grandfather's patient instruction and her father's example of sacrifice had prepared her for moments like these. The mocking laughter that had once followed her every move was now just a memory, replaced by the quiet respect that came from proven competence under pressure. She had transformed from the target of derision into the standard by which others measured themselves. As the aircraft disappeared into the distance, Fort Benning continued its mission of creating elite warriors. The ranges where Sarah had first proven herself would witness new achievements, new failures, and new triumphs. The story continued, written by each generation of soldiers who chose to serve something greater than themselves. The test had never really ended. It had simply evolved into something more challenging, more important, and more worthy of the skills she had spent a lifetime developing. And Sarah Martinez was ready for whatever came next.